Right, okay. Hello, nice to be here. And as Lorna said, thank you for the welcome. Neil Graham's my name, and I'm from New Zealand, and it's been a long way to come here, but I'm pleased with what I've seen today. I've enjoyed it. So I was talking to Nick a while ago, and he asked me to give a talk about forming a CLL Advocates group, which I've just been involved in leading in New Zealand in the last about 9 months or so. This is our logo, and this is the organisation called CLL Advocates New Zealand, CLLANZ. So I'll just start with the beautiful mountains of the South Island of New Zealand, and we have a holiday house here, and I go here to wind down and relax and mountain bike and ski and enjoy life and just get the feeling of what it's great, how great it is to be alive. And it's even better now that I've had such major health challenges over the last decade or so to appreciate it even more. So a brief personal story. I graduated in medicine from Otago University in Dunedin. I studied there in the first half of the 1970s, and then I trained in internal medicine specialty, and I'm a fellow of the Royal Australasian and the UK College of Physicians. I was appointed in 1985 as a consultant physician, and I worked in a place called Tauranga, which is in the North Island, the 5th biggest city in New Zealand, as a consultant physician for 30 years before retiring for health reasons. I'm described by others as a keen outdoors and family man, and the family man thing here is, here's a couple of my grandchildren walking around with buckets over their head for whatever reason. And I was diagnosed with CLL at the age of 50. So how this presented, I had some night sweats and I got a few colds, and I went to see my doctor, and I was found to have a lymphocyte count of 24, and I was 11q deletion. Watch and wait was taken at that stage for a while, and then my lymphocyte count went up to about 80, and so I had chlorambucil, which brought my lymphocyte count down to about 10 over 6 months, but then it took off again, and so I was given FCR. And the figures are there. I had 6 months, 6 courses of FCR, and that gave me 8 years remission. And then I relapsed, and I had 4 courses of FCR the second time. I didn't tolerate it as well, or my bone marrow didn't tolerate it as well, and I got a further 2 years remission. I was then put on a drug trial because there weren't many other options at that stage in New Zealand, with a drug called dinucyclib, which is a cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitor, and that just kept the disease under control with a lymphocyte count of around 50. I was very unenthusiastic about a stem cell transplant, which I was advised to have at that stage, because in the early stages of my medical career as a consultant, I'd seen some of the early cases of graft versus host disease, and I didn't like it. I was very fortunate at that time when I developed bone marrow failure that was transfusion dependent, that ibrutinib came along. And I've been on it for 5 years now, and I remain in remission. So that's my CLL story. I've had a few complications. I had a condition that's called COP, which is cryptogenic organizing pneumonia, which is a common pathway in the lungs for a whole variety of stimuli, including malignant disease. And I came close to being ventilated. As I mentioned, I had transfusion-dependent bone marrow failure 5 years ago, gonadal failure, and I also had part of my lung resected on the right side for lung cancer, adenocarcinoma. And this is me mountain biking, something I really enjoy. So just to talk a bit about the New Zealand cancer scene as far as oncological therapeutics goes, medications generally in New Zealand, and particularly oncological medications, are approved for prescription and use by New Zealanders by a regulatory authority that's called MedSafe. And then the medications go to an outfit called PTAC, which is Pharmaceutical Therapy Advisory Committee, and they make recommendations, and then a group called Pharmac decides on whether they're going to fund these medications. So Pharmac has been around for about 20 years or more, and it's been recognised very favourably internationally for effective negotiation re drug prices, and they're pretty hard negotiators, and they've managed to do a lot more with purchasing of medications in New Zealand than most groups probably have done. But in the new era of expensive cancer medications, their response has been to delay consideration, and they can make a consideration on a drug that can take several years, and then they'll often reject it. So we call this rationing by delay. And in particularly cancer, there's no rapid access scheme for revolutionary medication that comes along in this new era. And so Pharmac, to us, a lot of us, has become an obsolete model, anachronistic. So some examples of the failure of Pharmac. Ibrutinib, New Zealand, there are 44 countries apparently in the world that fund ibrutinib, and New Zealand doesn't. New Zealand ranks last out of 24 OECD countries for market access to modern medications. And one of the problems Pharmac has is it's definitely underfunded. Only 5% of our total health budget goes to Pharmac for medications, the publicly funded. Most countries it's between 10 and 15%. In some countries it's even about 18 or 19%. In comparison to Australia, New Zealand has a very socialist medical system, and most medications and health care and that are free to the average New Zealander. And Australia has a similar situation, a similar structure. But they provide about 70 cancer medications funded in Australia, whereas we fund about 7. And it's been worked out recently that if cancer treatments available in Australia had been funded in New Zealand by Pharmac, there would have been about 3,600 fewer deaths from cancer in a 5-year period up to 2017. If you need cancer treatment in New Zealand with one of these drugs like ibrutinib, you either pay for it yourself or get some charitable access, or you go into a drug trial, or you die. It's pretty grim, really. So the motivation for establishing CLLANZ, our patient advocate group, was predominantly for advocacy for funding of modern medications, and particularly ibrutinib and venetoclax. We also want to provide patient support, education for patients, and an information database they can readily go into to find out information about CLL. And the aim particularly was not to duplicate, but to complement and partner with related groups. So the infrastructure and support that were required, so we need a membership, and we're working on that at the moment. We've just started a membership, and we've got about 20 members at the moment. We did a lot of research on international groups that a lot of you people in this room will be members of, and finding out what they're doing, and then finding out what's good that they're doing and do those things, and what to avoid doing. We've had an outstanding project manager organising this whole thing, and she really just does keep things ticking over. There's a lot of little things to do, these bureaucratic elements like a trust deed, appoint trustees and have board meetings, achieve charitable status, a bank account, and then obviously fundraising and support, the fund issue you talked about there, Lorna. We've developed a website, and that's just been launched in the last month, and I'll give you the address of that later on. We've also got a Facebook group for day-to-day communications, and we've established links and partnerships, including particularly other New Zealand patient advocacy groups for cancer. We've developed relations with the media. We make press releases from time to time. We get interviewed on TV and radio and that sort of thing, and that's given us a bit of publicity. And as I said, we're doing a membership drive at the moment, and in probably about a month we will launch the group. And we're having doing it via a video link and live at the same time. We've had a lot of support from various groups. A National Leukemia Trust, Florence Peterson, has given us a lot of money, and a research trust I set up in Tauranga 30 years ago has also provided us with quite a bit of money, and Janssen has been helpful supporting our project manager, and then we've had great links with CLLANZ, and that's been very helpful, and Patient Power has been very helpful. A lot of these videos that they have of giving patients information, and then Leukemia Care with their fantastic booklet about what CLL is all about. So an update on work to date. This is a part of our web page. That's my welcoming, and we might be able to have a look at that later on. And then we have data like stuff on Pharmac, on various aspects of blood cancers, and journal articles and reviews and that sort of thing. This is the Facebook group and links onto the Facebook, and this is starting to work quite well too. And then anarchy hit the streets of Wellington in May this year because there's a lot of other groups who are unhappy about what Pharmac is not providing for cancer patients in New Zealand. 7 cancer advocate groups took to the streets of the capital city of Wellington and marched on Parliament, and then 7 individuals one from each of those groups then presented a petition to an MP saying please fund this drug or these drugs. And the people who presented the petitions wore these sort of rainbow type of outfits like this guy is wearing. And here's New Zealand Parliament. That's the beehive on the left. That's the big Parliament building in New Zealand. This is the old Parliament building behind. And this is a bunch of about 15 MPs waiting to receive petitions. And this is our CLL petition presenter in the middle at the bottom with his bit of paper in front of him. And then the media got involved and there's interviews afterwards. So, yeah. And then after that, we then presented a written submission about venetoclax and ibrutinib to be funded, and then we also, which is this here, and that was accompanied by over 1,000 signatures of members of the lay public, and then we presented an oral submission to a medical select committee of MPs, and this is us doing that. That went very well, and we got a lot of good publicity. So here's some things from the media about this particular day. It was very interesting. I came to tears presenting this, and it had a very powerful effect, it seemed, on the MPs who were present. This is just about being alive. Here it is. Yeah, he holds back the tears.
Yes, absolutely.
So other work to date, we've recently made a submission to Pharmac, because what has happened is that the Pharmac has listened to us regarding our submission for venetoclax and ibrutinib, and they've only proposed funding venetoclax and not ibrutinib. How many people in the audience come from a country that doesn't fund ibrutinib? Right. Okay.
We don't have limited funding.
Yeah, we don't have it in a frontline setting.
No,
So that's
no.
not for everybody.
Yeah,
It's in Ireland, it's not available in a frontline setting.
Right.
not in Sweden
Okay.
either.
So there is
But-
no reimbursement. You have to.
Okay.
you have to be
But generally it's widely
Second
available,
line.
but not in New Zealand, is the bottom line. Yes.
But you know, you in a frontline setting is
No.
when you need it.
No. Sure. But it's available for you can't use it at all funded in New Zealand, so you've got to buy it yourself. And so we've made a major submission to Pharmac about this proposal that they have, and saying that we believe that the two medications, ibrutinib and venetoclax, are complementary and both should be funded. We're, as I said, undertaking a membership drive, and we've already got members, and we're already starting a bit of a dialogue with these members about their needs and questions they have, and so we're starting. We've established these international links, as I've mentioned, which have been very helpful, and patient question videos, particularly from Patient Power, have been good. And then we're planning this, as I said, an online and in-person launch. How are we going for time?
We're okay.
There's a little video here, if we want to. It's a short video of 1.5 minutes, which is just. There's a lot of little things to do when you do these things, and this is just one of the little things. We ready to go? Okay, we can't do it. So this is just me welcoming people to join CLLANZ.
Can I ask a question? Tell me about membership. What does membership mean in your organization, and why was that a priority for you? Because you mentioned it a few times.
Yes.
Because a lot of us aren't member organizations. We have thousands of people visiting our website every day, but they're not members.
I guess I use that term fairly loosely. I mean, we're not going to have a subscription or anything like that, but we want to establish a group of people who we know their names and that they can join in with the group, and we can contact them if we want to or need to. That's all I mean by that.
But in some countries, membership list is a must if you're going to be a patient organisation.
Yeah.
So you can't be a patient organisation if you don't actually have members in your books.
Yes. I mean, I just guess it's a concept, a rationale, or a sort of a...
So you ask people for their name, above and beyond just their email address, ask for their name, and
we haven't really done this yet. We're in the process, and we're going to adapt and adopt what seems to be good sense. So, be interested to hear what other people have got to say about that.
We want people to register with the sites.
Yes. Yes.
You've got a database.
Yes. We want people to be aware of the site and to use it. I mean, we have a small country of population-wise, and we're going to have probably 100 or 200 members at most, I think. So it's not a...
You've almost answered my question, which is, do you have a sense of what the CLL population in New Zealand is?
Yes, so...
That's something...
Yes, probably about 2,000 people with CLL diagnosed, and there'll be quite a few undiagnosed in total. And there was a study done in the early to mid part of this decade, and the average number of new cases per year of CLL was 234 over about 7 years.
Just to put that in context, in the UK it's 4,300
Yes.
a year, and we reckon, and I think we calculated this ourselves, but that there's between 25 and 30,000 people in the UK have CLL. So
Right.
that gives you a point of comparison.
Yes. So they sound like about similar figures, yes. So some challenges, this is the last slide, challenges and lessons. So the old story, I'm sure we've all been involved in various projects, and you know, you will know of projects you've done, and I know of projects that I've done that have worked really well and others that haven't, and sometimes it's not quite clear why that happens. Some of it's serendipity, and there's been a bit of serendipity, like our name, for example. We were thinking about what acronym we were going to use, and so we were looking around the internet and we just typed in CLL and we found CLAN, and we weren't aware of the existence of CLAN before that, and then we made contact with Nick, and the rest is history. But a lot of it has been just hard work and just help from consulting other resources like the other groups around the world and what they do, and talking to other people, and our New Zealand equivalent groups and other malignant diseases. But what is clear that it's made this work so far has been a very good project manager, and I felt that's the key, and she's done a lot of enormously good work. Funding is obviously going to be a bit of a future issue, as Lorna said, but at the moment we're solvent, and these links to other sites, as I've already mentioned, CLL, that is, CLL sites, has been valuable. We're keeping the focus tight and keeping it down to a few things to do, and then we'll expand as demand arises and we get feedback and what people feel they need. There are obviously ongoing political issues, particularly relating to medications, and we've had a lot of help in the last 9 months or so from multiple individuals. And we've seized a few opportunities. We've had a lot of publicity. We've done this petition and we took part in the march, and we've made submissions. So that's where we're at. That's our story. And I'll give you an update in another year or two.
9 months. Amazing in 9 months.
Yeah. So that's part of what I was going to say. You've only been around for a really short period. So this is less than a year, which is pretty impressive, right? With the amount of stuff they've been able to do. And I know part of that, like you say, is serendipity, that you've been able to latch into other existing programs like the March that was planned and figure out those groups that you can work with. But it's a really good lesson in scanning your horizon and seeing who else is doing what. Because if there is a way to tag in your cause with other people's causes, that magnitude is actually quite impressive. That's what brings media to an event like that, when there's so many more people on a street advocating for the same thing, even if their mission of why they're doing it may be slightly different. Can you also let them know how many people are on your board or your steering committee, whatever you want to call it?
Yes, the board of trustees. We have 4. We have a lawyer who is my daughter, one of my daughters. We have a professor of history who is a patient, and we have a hematologist and myself.
And how did you find these people?
So
whose idea was this? This is you starting.
I was the one who chose. Well, we had a discussion, this project manager and I said we decided what sort of people we wanted. We needed a hematologist who had an interest in CLL. We needed a lawyer, and we needed a patient who wasn't a medical specialist. And then I was a bit of 2 people, I guess.
And who here hasn't recruited your family to be a volunteer?
I'll leave it at that.
So is your project manager staffed by your organisation?
She does consultancy work.
All the people are volunteers. I mean, in the organisation, all are
Well,
working as volunteers.
There's colleagues and friends, and I mean, we haven't got into using these volunteers a lot. I just mentioned a lot of people have sort of helped with a bit of this and a bit of that along the way, but we haven't got to the stage where we've grown to a unit where one of the things we'll have, for example, it will be centres developing locally around the country. This is what I think is going to happen, and there will be a CLL interest group in Auckland, there'll be a CLL interest group in Wellington and other centres around, and we'll need help in putting those groups together, and there'll have to be people who are volunteers to help run those local groups.
Good.
Do you have a constitution and a full register or not yet?
We have a trust deed. So that's sort of effectively a constitution, I suppose.
And you're not registered yet, but you're pursuing that.
As a?
Registered charity?
Yes, we are.
Oh, you are registered
Yes.
now. Yeah. Okay. Other questions for Neil? Smart though, eh? Like they found one thing that they wanted to do and then found a way to expand on that in a very short period of time and bring some attention to their group in a very public way. Which is actually really impressive. And then finding ways to take advantage of other materials that are already existing out there. Like he says, you know, it was important for them to provide education, but when you have someone like you use Patient Power, you had a conversation, I guess, with Andrew Shore,
yes.
and
Esther
said, hey, can we share some of your videos? Just, you know, You know, the organization was open to doing that, so you did not have to do everything yourself. They had a conversation with Leukemia Care, and Nick had just updated their CLL manual, did a good enough job that they were like, can we use this? And got their permission so that they can create some materials and have that available without having to put the time and energy themselves into it. Now, you may at some point want to customize those kinds of things more, but for now, it's a great way to provide a suite of information with limited costs associated to it.
Yes, and people have been very generous. Like Esther Shaw has provided us with about 15 videos, and the cancer booklet from the UK. We've New Zealandized it.
Yes.
Yes, and it's on our website, and that came with the blessing of Nick and others.
Yeah. Pierre?
Yes. Did you get a credible explanation about venetoclax being accepted and ibrutinib being refused?
Well, we're going through that process at the moment, but it doesn't seem very rational. A very rational decision. Doesn't fit into international guidelines. It is flawed from the point of view of venetoclax requires close supervision medically in the first few months, and if you live in a small town and way down the southwest corner of New Zealand, it's not going to be very suitable for you to go on to venetoclax, and a whole lot of other reasons.
It's time-limited treatment.
Yes.
Yes. And it's money.
Yeah.
It's effective and it's time-limited.
Maybe the rate?
Yes, that's right. And I think it was a purely financial decision, really, from Pharmac, rather than anything else. Yeah.
It's the reality of the world, though. I think it's a tricky balance, because pharma is a business, and you know, you have to work hand in hand with that. I don't think that's a bad model. they have to be funded, and they have to run as pharmaceutical companies. I think the challenge is there in the political environment and whatever political motivations are at play. You know, we've a very similar setup in Ireland. There's a whole process that you have to go through, and hoops of fire and applications, and for volunteer organisations to have the expertise and the time to create and put in submissions for assessment and pharmaceutical approvals. It's a very complicated process to do, and so he who shouts loudest gets most, and that's just the political landscape that most people live in. So it is a very tricky balance, and when you have the pushback where you're not getting necessarily a sounded and reasoned answer for why things are refused, it's more than likely that there was just a bigger, better proposal put in for venetoclax.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and we do have an advocacy session later in the agenda, so on Saturday, I think. So, no, it's Friday, tomorrow afternoon. So we will actually focus a lot into that whole access to drugs.
We have a very close relationship with Australia. It's probably even closer than the Irish and the English type of thing. And
questionable at the moment.
yeah, whatever, something like that. But you know, Australia is just streets ahead in oncological pharmacotherapy compared to New Zealand, and there's no really good reason for that.
Rita, you had a question? I saw your hand kept going.
I wanted to comment on before, Pierre, that you are lucky that it's an English-talking country, because the other countries who doesn't know how, they don't get the information from others the same way.
Yeah.
Because there are so many information in English, but not in Danish, for example.
Yes,
And it would be a cost to get it translated where we wouldn't, I can't afford that.
yes. No, that has been fortunate.
Yeah.
But as I said before, the generosity has been amazing too. And that's good. And I mean, that's one of the, I guess, the themes of this meeting, isn't it? This connectivity, communication and sharing resources. And somebody said before, not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
The jargon just keeps tripping off the tongues.
Yes. And even when there is a cost involved with doing subtitling or something, it's still cheaper than actually creating a whole video for new, for sure. Yeah.
Apart from the relations that you are having with the other groups around you, I want to be clear about the member of parliament. How are they positive to your group? Did they speak more about your group?
Sorry, my hearing's not too good. Can somebody just tell
I'm
me?
saying that you are having a good relationship with the other people around you. And you are saying the member of parliament have something to say about your organization.
The members of parliament.
Yeah, the member of parliament.
Do they have something to say about your organization?
Yes, I don't know. I've not spoken to any MP personally.
Yeah, so when you did the march and then you were able to talk about, you remember brought to tears that headline.
Yes.
What's been the impact of that since? I know it's all very new.
Well,
so.
the submission was to approve venetoclax and ibrutinib, and they've done 50% of that.
Okay.
So it's kind of, one could suspect that it's kind of had an impact. It's worked.
Yeah, you got one new drug.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this march of seven cancer groups has had another effect in that several other modern oncological medications have been approved or proposed for funding at the same time that venetoclax was approved.
All right. We're going to let you sit, and not that we won't ask more questions later, maybe.